Begin with breaking news. Iran launched a major missile attack on Israel. More U.S. forces are headed to the Middle East as the attack has sparked growing fears of an expanding war in the region. CBS's Natalie Brand has more from the White House.
Sirens wailed and explosions could be seen in the skies over Israel as Iran launched a ballistic missile attack against Israel.
I think this escalates the situation really in a very serious way.
Iran's UN mission says it launched the attack because of Israel's attacks on Hezbollah and in retaliation for Israel's ground offensive in Lebanon. Iran also promised what it calls a, quote, crushing response if Israel retaliates. A U.S. defense official confirms American forces are helping to intercept some of the Iranian missiles. This comes as the Pentagon has moved additional military support to the Middle East to help Israel defend against further attacks. The U.S. is sending 3 additional aircraft squadrons to the region. An F-15, F-16, and A-10 squadron will be arriving soon, joining another squadron already in the region. This is on top of the 2,000 to 3,000 more U.S. service members the Pentagon ordered to the region Monday to join the more than 40,000 already there.
An Iranian diplomatic source told CBS News that hardliners within Iran were demanding the strike against Israel. The White House had previously warned that an attack will carry severe consequences for Iran.
Israel says it's keeping its ground forces close to the border to try to stop Iranian-backed Hezbollah forces from launching rockets into Israel.
If the state of Lebanon and the world can't push Hezbollah away from our border, we have no choice but to do it ourselves.
Israel has warned Lebanese citizens to evacuate the area, and many are heeding those calls, with Hezbollah escorting civilians out. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
And to help us dive deeper into this latest attack, we're joined now by Wayne State Professor of Teaching and Near Eastern Studies, Professor Saeed Khan. Thanks for being on with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
And we just heard the latest from our CBS News correspondent there. U.S. military equipment helped to intercept some of those missiles. Also minimal but additional forces now being deployed. Does that surprise you? We know it has been some back and forth on the U.S.'s support for Israel. In the past year, we've seen that really wax and wane. We're approaching the 1-year mark of this attack. What do you make of the White House's decision today?
I think that the only difference that's occurred in the last 12 months is rhetorical. The U.S. has said from the White House and from the Pentagon and even the State Department that perhaps some of the aid to Israel might be conditional, particularly when it seems as though Prime Minister Netanyahu was resistant to agreeing on a ceasefire. But if we take a look at the numbers thus far, the United States has supplied somewhere along the lines of $45 billion worth of aid to Israel for its military support. So I'm not really sure then that we can make a case that the United States has necessarily equivocated on its support, and particularly when we find that there are now naval battle groups deployed in the Eastern Mediterranean, including military, other air support that's also there. It seems as though the United States is not just supplying actual support, but is now part of the conflict itself.
Shortly after these attacks started, I believe it was around 8 o'clock local time there in Israel, we learned that U.S. intelligence had informed Israel of the probability of such attack. Do you think that this is closely related to the most recent attacks on Hezbollah and Lebanon, or do you think you need more context for this and it may not necessarily be an immediate repercussion for those actions?
Well, according to your national reporting, the Iranian mission to the United Nations, in fact, stated 3 reasons why it is taking the action that it is. 2 of those are related to the more immediate, the assassination by Israel of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut, as well as the ground offensive and invasion of southern Lebanon by the Israeli military. But the 3rd reason is also the fact that Iran's sovereignty was breached a few weeks ago by the Israelis when they launched an attack that killed Hamas's leader Ismail Haniyeh, who was in Tehran. In most cases, that would be seen as a declaration of war to have one's international sovereignty breached in such a way. And so we find then that there's multiple rationales by which Iran is then invoking its actions today.
We mentioned you're a professor at Wayne State University. I imagine you've been teaching these courses for some time. Can you share some insight? How different has this semester and last semester been for you teaching as there's an ongoing global conflict, and how have students been receiving this course in real time?
Well, from a history course perspective, it's had two major factors to consider. One is, of course, being updated on an area of the world where, shall we say, events and issues and conflicts are very fluid. But it also requires then the much needed historical context and background that helps explain how we got to this point. And so we find that particularly in my courses that deal with contemporary Middle East issues, there has been a lot of interest, a lot of curiosity about how we have arrived at this point, as much as, of course, students will very reasonably be asking, where are we going from here?
I know you didn't do any major polling, but I am curious, Professor, roughly what percentage of Americans would you say have that critical context that you believe is needed here?
This is why I'm a historian and not a pollster, but I would suggest that probably the amount of true context and understanding about the Middle East among the American public is probably very low. I would even hazard a guess that it's above the single digits, because it is a very complex situation. And of course, we also have to be well intended when we understand the source material that we're receiving, how we process that, and understanding really, again, the fullness of a situation that has been in play now for several decades.
We appreciate your perspective. Single digits, certainly noteworthy there. Professor Saeed Khan with Wayne State, thank you so much for your time.